Welcome to the Battle Ready podcast, where we know that every single day is a battle. This show is about equipping you mentally, physically, and spiritually to win the daily battles. I want you to become totally free, whole, and powerful. It's time to step into your battles equipped and ready to win. I'm your host, Dr. Kaylee Judge. Let's get battle ready. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Battle Ready podcast. This is Dr. Kaylee, and we are on number 3 of the Enneagram types. We've still got Angie here with us, rocking the show. People are loving this series. We're getting a ton of feedback, a lot of traffic on Instagram. And if you haven't followed my Instagram, I am putting up every single day is, I think, an amazing kind of snippet of different pieces of each type. And people have just been going wild over the post. So it's actually kind of cool to see because that's a newer account. So people are, like the traffic that's coming through because of the Enneagram types is pretty neat. Today we're going to be talking about Enneagram 3, which is the achiever. They are the driven person. They have a deep love for themselves and all kinds of stuff. We're going to get into a ton of it. And we were just kind of pre-framing this, with Angie right before I started recording. This is a tough number. If you know somebody that's a 3, or if you are a 3, just know that you are loved for who you are and where you're at. And, we don't need you to keep pushing forward, but this whole conversation is going to be out of love. It is not an attack on anybody or anything. So we've got Angie here with us. Welcome. What's going on?
Hello. It's so good to be here again. Not too much. Just gonna talk about these 3s, these achievers today. It's interesting. A lot of there's a couple of the numbers that I say get a bad rap. Right. And so it's hard. I did a training, actually, I won't say with who, but I did a training one time with a ministry, and there was a strong 8 in the group, and not very self-aware. And so it's interesting because 8s and 3s often get a pretty bad rap because their personality is so strong, and they can be so laser focused on what they are, what they're trying to do. 3s are extremely that way because they are laser focused on their name, the achiever. They're laser focused on their achievements. And so it can be really tough sometimes to get them to step outside of their achievements. And the reason why is we've hammered out this is the last of the 3 numbers that are very image oriented. So we've said that in each of these different podcasts, but if you recall, if you've listened to the 1 and the 2, we said that the 1, 2, and the 3 are very what we call image conscious, but for very different reasons. So the 1 wants to be seen a certain way. They want to be seen as being very right or moral. The 2 wants to be seen as being the helper or the helpmate or the one that's coming to your rescue. And then the 3 wants to be seen as the achiever, the one that is very goal-oriented, the one that is very driven, the one that is very makes their goals and achieves them. And they want to be seen that way. The difficult part about a 3 is that because it's an image thing for them, often they will struggle with, if they aren't living in an achievement reality, then they'll create one a little bit. And we can get more into that and what that looks like, or what that can look like for the achiever. But they have a desperate need to be seen that way.
What do you mean creating the reality of achievement?
So we'll get into this, but every number has a struggle, right? And deception can be one of a three's struggle. So if we aren't living in the reality of our achievements the way we want to, then we can, I mean, we have outlets to do this, right? Big time now with social media. So I can perceive myself one way, but in reality, something else is going on behind the scenes. Maybe my business isn't doing as good as I'm letting on that it's doing. Maybe my accomplishments aren't rolling along as quickly or as at fast pace as I want them to, but I can put the image out there that it is something different than what it actually is. And it's not that they are consciously deceptive at times. It's just this deep-seated need that when they are in an unhealthy space, they kind of reside in that place of, I need to be seen this way.
So even when there's bad things happening in their world, they create the world that they want to be in their mind.
Yeah. And, I was talking to somebody the other day about this. I see this a lot with every single number. So this is not just indicative of one number or another number. So we don't want to badger one
Yeah.
this way and everybody else is, because what happens is we'll read kind of the not so pretty parts of our number, and we will not want to own up to that being our core personality because we don't like those things. But the reality is, and we've said this before, is that we all have things that we don't love. And so that's where the growth place comes in. That's where the self-awareness comes in. But we all do that to some degree, right? Like we can all create a sense of reality in our head that's the reality we want to live in. And social media, I say all the time, social media gives us a phenomenal platform to do that. And we see that all the time. And some people call it the highlight reels, some people call it, whatever. But we all have our tendencies towards that. But threes really struggle in that area, especially if things aren't going the way that they see fit or see that they should be going. Yeah. So they really struggle with that. But on the other side of the coin, which there's always another side of the coin, they're amazing. They have awesome qualities. These are your people that you do not have to motivate them. They are self-starters. They're self-motivators. You don't have to, what my dad always used to say, you don't have to light a fire under their butt to get them going. They are going to do it themselves. They're very optimistic. They're self-affirming. They're not high maintenance when it comes to that. They are very industrious and efficient. They're very efficient with their time. They're very self-propelled, very energetic, goal-oriented. They'll if they make a goal, they're going to achieve that goal, or at least do everything in their power to try to achieve that goal. And they're big team builders. They're very good at team building and leading a team, especially in their health. So they're amazing people. And so at their best.
So that's at their best.
Yeah.
Where do we want to go? Where do we want to go first as far as like talking about a three? Do we want to talk about their worst? Do we want to talk about in relationships? Do we want to talk about how do you want to kind of drive this vehicle?
We can kind of knock out their struggles, or at their worst, if you want to say. Their struggles, like I said, they can be very deceptive. They can have a little bit of a narcissistic personality. And what we mean by that, nobody likes to be labeled that, right? But what we mean by that is just what we were just talking about, is if the reality of my achievements aren't what I want them to be, then I can create something or make it seem what I want it to be. But the other side of the coin is that in that narcissistic tendencies is that it's extremely hard for them to see their own faults, but is very, very easily, they can very easily turn to your faults because they want to be seen as successful and achieving. They can be very vain. They can be very superficial, flashy at times with their things or their money or things like that. And then they can be overly competitive. And the other side of the deceptive coin for them is in this overly competitive part of their personality, they can cut corners in order to win the race, if you will. If there is a promotion going on at work, then I've got to keep myself in the lead, and so I can find ways to cut corners in order to do that. And so it doesn't seem like that would be what a 3 would do, but there's this need to stay in the front of the race. And so if they feel like they need to cut corners or be deceptive in that, then they can be.
So I had a question the other day, and this is, I think this is going to cover all the numbers, but let's talk specifically about a 3. Maybe we can cover this in the ones moving forward. Like,
Yeah.
so say somebody is in an unhealthy version of themselves.
Yeah.
How do we move from unhealth to health when it comes to expressing our personalities and that whole process?
So I have 1 week that I really hammer in with my one-on-one clients. I have 1 week that I really hammer in the level, what we call the levels of health within each number, which is very interesting. And it's a very good time. It's about mid sessions that I work with them on this, because, and reason being is because we've kind of explored their wings, we've explored their lines and arrows, we've explored how they respond in different seasons as far as stress and things like that. Now we get into this whole idea of levels of health, right? And the big chunks of levels of health is healthy, average, and unhealthy. And you hear people talk about that a lot with the Enneagram, especially with lines and arrows, right? So in stress, we exemplify some of the average to unhealthy parts of our stress number, or vice versa with growth. So it's extremely interesting for people to really understand their levels of health in that healthy, average, and unhealthy space. And the reason I really like for my clients to camp in this space for a little bit and really become very aware of what their personality looks like in these areas is because in general, we all probably can say we live in this average space, right? We're just doing life until something hits the fan, or until a pandemic happens, or until we get that high achievement, or we get that promotion. So until these highs or lows happen in our life, we kind of live in that average space. It's our human nature. And so I always want people to understand what average looks like for your personality, because anything can happen and we can slip down into that unhealthy pretty quickly. And so it's really important for us to understand, what does our personality look like in health, average, and unhealth, so that we can be aware of those things. All of this has to do, it boiled in my counseling experience and in my education that I spent a few years to get in counseling, it all boils down to one thing. It boils down to self-awareness, right? And so if I'm self-aware, if I'm aware enough about my personality, let's talk about threes. So if I'm in the average space of a three, they start to disconnect themselves from their true authentic self of who Christ created them to be. And they start identifying more with their achievements than who they are as a child of God, right? And so we begin to slowly, in that average space for a three, we begin to slowly disconnect who I am authentically in Christ and start to connect more with solely our achievements. Well, when we lose that promotion, or pandemic happens and our business isn't doing very well, or anything can happen, then we can slip into that unhealthy space where we really become disconnected with our identity in Christ, and we become solely connected with our achievements, and all of that's falling apart. So we find ourselves moving to that unhealthy space as a six, and we'll talk about that for the three. We find ourselves moving to that unhealthy space of depression, anxiety, loss, grieving, and things like that. And then we start to self-medicate. We start to do all sorts of things in that unhealthy space. But the biggest piece to what you're talking about is just understanding, what does my personality look like in these levels of health? And when I'm aware of what they look like, then I can be aware of when I'm living in each of those spaces, and almost have a sense of, man, I don't want to live. I've been coasting for a little bit now. How do I move into the healthy space so that I'm not just living in this average space for long periods of time? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Is there any like exercises that you have people walk through in order to do this, or is it solely based off of self-awareness and becoming aware of, okay, these are the attributes that are unhealthy or average, and this is what I kind of want to move into? So recognizing those things in the moment, and shifting towards that. Is there anything that's going to help people to recognize those things and then move into a different level? Because I know that transition, because I feel like what could happen is, I know I'm supposed to be somewhere, I don't know how to get there, so therefore I'm going to fall backwards even further.
Yeah. So I have I have a really cool tool that I put together based on a bunch of reading that I had done and studying that I had done of the Enneagram. And one author or somebody that put together a really cool piece, and it was a very faith-based piece, put together upstream and downstream practices for each of the numbers. So when you look at spiritual disciplines, we can look at those and we can go, okay, solitude is a spiritual discipline, fasting is a spiritual discipline, journaling is a spiritual discipline, all of these things, right? Prayer, spiritual disciplines. Some of those come more natural to some of the numbers than others. And so I always encourage people, even if you're not of faith, or even if you don't have currently have a relationship with Christ or your creator, there's still disciplines that you can put into practice. I talk a lot about mindfulness, about meditation and things like that come into play. So for a three, let's take them specifically, for instance, mindfulness and meditation is extremely hard for them. I would call that an upstream practice for them. I always encourage my clients to put into place downstream practices and upstream practices. So a downstream practice for a three which would be easy for them, would be starting their day with a to-do list, making sure that we have some some self-awareness to-dos in there as well, right? And making sure that I achieve those things. For an achiever, that's really easy, even if it's some self-awareness things that are in there and not only goal-oriented things that are in there, because it's a list. I can do this, I can achieve it, I can mark it off. That's easy for a 3. But solitude or mindfulness or some of those things are not going to be as easy for a 3. Why? Because it's hard for a 3 to slow down their brain. And so I always tell people, for a 3, I've had one client that I've tried to get them to slow their brain down to practice mindfulness. And that may just be practice mindfulness where you're being aware of your senses for a certain amount of time, where you are bringing your thoughts back to the moment and being present, because what a 3 is constantly doing is it's constantly looking in the future. And so mindfulness and meditation is extremely important for a 3. So putting some of those things into practice slows the mind down enough for you to be self-aware. But oftentimes what happens is we don't take the time to do that, and therefore we don't practice self-awareness in these different areas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense. Yeah.
So, and these disciplines are super important. They seem trivial in the moment. But when we train, you're a doctor, when we train our brain and our emotions to do something different than they've always done, you're also a triathlete, right? Mm-hmm. So if I can run and I can bike, but by golly, I cannot swim. I mean, swimming is like hard for me. So if I want to be a triathlete and I only bike and run, then I'm never going to be a triathlete, because I'm not training my body to do what I'm telling it that I want it to do. It's the same thing with mental and emotional practices.
That's good.
So it seems trivial in the moment, and you're like, but that's not, and 3s don't like that, because they want an A, B, C, and D. Tell me exactly how I'm going to get to the healthy space. Well, you have to train your mind to do some of these things before you're going to move into that self-aware, healthy space. And that seems trivial to them.
You were talking earlier about a 3 moving into a stressful 6, I believe.
Yes.
Can you talk about what happened? That's one of their lines and arrows. So can you talk about what happens when a 3 moves in, is stressed out?
Yes. So when a 3, and then we can come back to the wings, because I know that's always a big question for people is the wings. And people sometimes don't understand those. And so with each session, I want to make sure that we go through that.
Yeah,
but sure. Yes. So I'm sorry. Under stress, I botched that. Under stress, a 3 goes to actually and I don't want to say they go to, that insinuates that their personality changes, right? Or their number changes. I always say in my trainings, they begin to exemplify some of the average to unhealthy qualities of a 9. So my apologies, in their security point, who they are, the people that they are most secure with, then they will exemplify some of the average to unhealthy places of a 6. So what does that look like under stress for them? So when they go to, or when they start to exemplify some of these average to unhealthy parts of a 9, which is what happens either in a stressful moment or stressful situation or a stressful season of life, which is kind of where we've camped over the last couple of months as a culture or as a society. They can become very disengaged, which is not the norm for a 3. Their 3s are typically pretty engaged in what they're doing, what they're achieving, their work, all of those things. But in their stress, they can cut off and become very disengaged, very empathetic. They can neglect themselves as well as their achievements, their goals. And then they can often numb out. This is indicative of a 3 under stress. So, and I tell people all the time, we have multiple avenues of numbing out in our culture, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen on Facebook, okay, I'm done with that Netflix series. Anybody got another one for me? Hello, that's numbing out, people. Like, face reality. And 3s have a hard time doing that in stress. They have a hard time facing reality, so they will just cut off and numb out, whether that's Netflix, whether that's gaming, whether that is self-medicating with alcohol, food, things like that.
Yep.
Are we having some
epiphanies? I just know some 3s, and it's cool for me to be able to, like, oh, that makes total sense, you know? So it's neat. This whole process is really cool. So
and here's the thing, it's cool that you said that in the stress, because what we need to understand is when we understand, especially the people we do the life with the most, right? I mean, it's important to understand, but we're not going to know all of these deep things about the general people that we do life with, right? But the people that we do life with the most, when we understand that they are either in a stressful season of life, and we've said this before, it does not give them an excuse, right? But what it does for us is it gives us an understanding. Doesn't give them an excuse, but it does give us an understanding that they're in a stressful season of life. I can extend grace right now because their behavior is a representation of what's internally going on inside of them. And I say that all the time. That's all behavior is for all of us. And I've said that multiple times on some of these, is our behavior is just a reflection of what's going on inside of us. It's rarely a reflection of the other person.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So at their growth point, which is really awesome, the 3 will exemplify the healthier parts of a 6. So this is where I think when you really start deep diving and doing some really strong work within the Enneagram, it's you don't only look at your own levels of health, but you also look at your lines and arrows levels of health, because that's when it's really going to give you insight into where you're really growing, right? So you're not only exemplifying the best parts of yourself, your core personality, but you're also exemplifying a higher side of your lines and arrows, which for a 3 is a 6. So the vain, deceitful 3s become more cooperative. They become more compassionate and committed to others, because 6 is the loyalist. So they become more committed to others in their growth than they are their achievements. So they're more others-oriented than self-oriented, which is a struggle for a 3 in their unhealth. And then they can become more aware of their feelings. So this is something that I work with 3s all the time, is identifying their feelings, because a lot of them are good at identifying anger, because they can be angry that they're not achieving this, or they can be angry that this isn't going their way, but there's typically something underneath the anger that is actually going on. So identifying their feelings is really important for 3s. It's important for all of us, but it's important for 3s, and can be a growth point for them.
Yeah, that's good. To be able to understand, I don't know. I love these arrows, and so just to be able to understand, because even sometimes it's like that's not typically a part of me, but really actually it is, because in your healthy state, as you're growing, you're moving to that space anyway. And so just being able to accept these different kind of ways that we kind of ebb and flow as we go through things, I think that's really, really cool. Anything else on the growth or stress lines and arrows?
Yeah, I think it's just important to understand, like I said before, it's just important to understand what that looks like for you. These are all self-awareness pieces that we can take within our personality, because it can seem like, I know I've said this before, it can seem like a lot. It can seem like a lot of information, like, gosh, that's overwhelming. But at the end of the day, it gives us insight into our motivation. So if I'm growing as a 3, I have a motivation to exemplify these healthier qualities that I have the ability to exemplify, because it's in my nature to do it. And so we understand our ability, and that alone is motivating for a 3, because when they feel like they have the ability to do something in their health, they're like, okay, let's do it, right? And so they have the ability to tap into or to exemplify some of these healthier qualities of this other number that really brings out a whole nother layer of who they are. Which is what makes us so complex, which is why I love the verse in Psalm 139 where it says that we were created in a complex way. We aren't black and white. We aren't stagnant. There's so many layers to who we are, and this sheds light. So I don't want this to overwhelm people. I want it to shed light on the different layers of who you are and understanding yourself and those that you do life with.
Amen. Preach it, sister.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about 3's wings. Like, they need any more to go along with them. Let's spice them up a little bit.
The wings are, for a 3, are a 2 and a 4. So when we look at the wings, let's just refresh in case you have not been with us and you're just listening to this podcast. So let's just refresh really quickly on what are wings. We've illustrated wings a couple of different ways. One being that your home space, or in this case, the 3, is a hard-boiled egg. And then we have our wings on either side, which is our salt and pepper. We kind of said they're kind of how we flavor our personality. It gives us, just like we just said, another layer into our personality. We've also talked about 3, in this case, being our home space. It's where we live. It's where we breathe. It's where we cook. It's where we do life. And then we have our neighbors, or our wings, being our 2 and our 4. We may visit our 2 more often because we have more in common with them, but then we visit our 4 every now and then too, because we like to tap into all the different qualities of our wings. There are some authors or people that have studied the Enneagram that truly believe that you'll hear this a lot, I'm a 3 with a 2 wing, or I'm a 3 with a 4 wing. And you'll see like 3W2 or 3W4. That indicates that author or that person believes that I am a 3 with a 4 wing, or I am a 3 with a 2 wing. I come more from the school of thought that we tap into kind of both of our wings. Most people do, to some degree. And that's where I like to use the seasoning or the flavoring. I'm a 4, and I flavor my personality more with the 3 than I do 5. But in all actuality, I'll give you prime example, and this really kind of sheds light on wings. In this whole pandemic thing, I have learned to tap into my 5, which a 5 is more introverted. A 5 is more studious. They kind of put their head down and study, and they're more cerebral. I have tapped more into my 5 wing than my 3 wing during this whole pandemic, social distancing type thing. So I have the ability to survive by tapping into the healthy qualities of that 5 than I in this season. So we can use our wings to flavor or benefit our personality any way we like. So for the 3 with the 2 wing or a strong 2 wing, they're more warm, they're more encouraging, because that's what 2s are. They're the helper, if you remember. They're more sociable. They can be more popular because they love to be around people. And they enjoy being the center of attention. If you're the 3 with the 4 wing, you become more emotional. You can become more introverted, more connected to your emotions than the 3 typically is, and more imaginative, more visionary. And so those are some of the qualities of those that tap into one or more of those 2 wings, if you will.
Good. Any more wings?
Yeah, that kind of sums up the wings. I know wings are hard for people. And so I would encourage you to not stress out over it. One author that I like, it's a book called Mirror for the Soul. And it's really good. And she really talks about, look at the qualities, the high qualities of your wings, and ask yourself, what do I want to tap into? And what do I not want to tap into? What naturally feels like something I want to exemplify or tap into, and what doesn't? And so I would say, don't stress out about your wings, but just let that kind of be a free-flowing thing that you kind of look into and study when it comes to your own personality.
How about I don't think that we've done this before, but I kind of posted it on Instagram and it got some traction. So I want to talk about how, how to get along with the 3, right? So if you are in a relationship with a 3, and then maybe we can kind of turn that table and how 3s can be in relationship with others, right? So how to kind of treat others, and also how to treat a type 3.
Yeah. So for a 3, how to get along with a 3. So they like to be reminded of their value and their worth. So that's really important to a 3. So I would say a lot of 3s might be words of affirmation type people. Not all of them, but if we're talking love language, they might be words of affirmation. When you need to give them feedback, don't give them unduly critical feedback, because what that does is it feels like you're attacking what they felt like was maybe an achievement or a good thing that they did. So be mindful of that, of how critical you're being with a 3. It means a great deal to them to reveal that you love them for simply being themselves. Because here's the thing about a 3. They want to be loved and accepted just for being themselves, although they portray that they want to be loved for their achievements. They really don't. Deep down, they just want to be loved for being them. and not for what they achieve or what that they can do for you or what they can accomplish. Keeping my environment harmonious and peaceful is very important to them. One thing about a 3 is if you see a 3 or you work with a 3 or you live with a 3 and you see them focused in, dialed in on whatever they're doing, don't interrupt them. That's a big deal for a 3. It says that you respect them. It says you respect what they're doing and all of those things. Don't interrupt them. So if you have something you need to say and you think you might forget, write it down and go to them later. Because that's a big deal for a 3. If you break their momentum, they feel flustered, they feel frustrated, and they might act in their stress. They don't enjoy dealing with too many negative emotions from others. Having emotional balance is something that they value. So if too much negative is coming at them at once, they can go to that 9. They can shut down pretty easily. And then tell them that being with them, that you're proud of them and that being with them is enjoyable. They like to hear that. They like to hear that their presence matters. So that is a little bit about getting along with or doing life with a 3, do's and don'ts, if you will. 3s doing life with other numbers. I mean, I guess that looks different for all different numbers, but 3s really have to reel in and tap into, if you will, that 2 wing that they're capable of tapping into, of being more others oriented than self oriented, because 3s can get very self-centered and focused, hyper focused, if you will, on themselves and their achievements. So getting them outside of that is really important.
Good stuff, Ange. What else do you have for us?
What's that?
What else do you have for us here?
So we always talk about, core fear and core desire. And a lot of times when people are struggling with what number they might be, 8s and 3s are often mistyped. 2s and 9s are often mistyped. So there's some numbers that can be mistyped on the Enneagram. Ironically, just recently, I have a new client that was really torn between the 7 and the 3, which is different. She's later in life, and so she's kind of lived her whole life not really understanding the core of herself, and so we're deep diving into that. But for a 3, the core desire is to feel valuable and worthwhile, like I said, just for being themselves. So much of their internal value comes from what they do or what they accomplish, but deep down they want to feel valuable to those that they love or those that are important to them, just for who they are, just for being themselves. Now, that takes self-work on their part by believing that, right? So if a 3 is in an unhealthy space and I tell them, you're valuable just for being you, if they're not doing the self-work to believe that, then they're never going to believe it. So they have to do the self-work in order to come to that conclusion. And the conclusion is, right, that Ephesians 2:10, where it says that salvation comes from Christ alone and not for the good works that you do, right? It's understanding that we are who we are because of our Creator, not for anything that we do or we accomplish. Those are just, I like to say, added bonuses, right? And so it's really important for 3s to do that self-work, to understand that, but also to believe it for themselves. Their core fear is failure, being incapable, unimpressive, inefficient, or exposed. And what we mean by exposed is if I'm in an average to unhealthy place and I'm not, if you will, getting the job done, and that's exposed or that is brought to light, then that is a core fear of a 3. And so it's really important for 3s to believe that they are so much more than just their achievements in order for them to move into and live in that healthy space. It's detaching themselves from their achievements and being fully engaged in who they are in Christ.
Yep. That's good.
It's hard for all of us, right? It's hard for
It is.
We all have insecurities, but that would be one of their biggest insecurities, is having to detach themselves from their achievements.
And I think even like you were talking about earlier, how social media plays a role in so much of our acceptance, non-acceptance, achievements, non-achievements, all that stuff. You know, you post a 3 posts a picture on Instagram and it only gets 3 likes and they're expecting 300. You know, that's going to be a downward spiral for them. And so if you are in that space, if you are the 3, if you are knowing that like you're looking to social media or other things like that for your acceptance and approval, you know, maybe it's time to take a social media time out, right, and you know, do a week or do 2 weeks or even do 2 days, just to kind of give again, like you were talking about earlier, to calm your mind down, slow it down a little bit. You know, you go from one task to the other, to social media, to another task, to dinner with a friend, to social media, to, like, you're constantly going, and we don't develop those spaces in our world to be able to take a break. And so maybe for you right now, like the simplest step to start moving from unhealth to average to health is going to be, you know what, I'm just going to take a social media timeout. Maybe it's just a 24-hour thing. Maybe it's during your work hours. Maybe you leave your phone at home one day. I don't know what it is. But I believe that is so super important for you to tackle that. And it is going to be difficult. Like a social media, for me, even a social media fast is more difficult than like a food fast. I can go days without food, but I take social media off my phone or keep my phone at home. And it's like it's the way our brain is wired right now is insane. And if you are not aware of that, if you're sitting there and be like, well, that's not me, I don't have a problem with that. Leave your phone at home today and see how many times you check your purse or you check your backpack to see what's going on, or take just take social media off of your home screen and see how many times you go to the same spot that the social media was in to open up Facebook or to open up Instagram and see how many likes you got on your last picture and see what everybody's doing. I know that you'll see that there's a lot of incongruency in your life as far as what you even know that's happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And one thing our pastor said this weekend in the series that he's doing is the fastest way to ruin something special is to compare it to something else.
Yes.
And that hit home to me because, like I said, I'm a 4 and I tap into my 3 wing way more often than I tap into my 5 wing. And so social media for me is a hard double-edged sword. Hard double-edged sword. And it is for most 3s because there is this comparison game that happens and goes on constantly. And that's why I say, you know, fasting from food is probably pretty easy for a 3, simply because you tell them to do something, they'll achieve it. Like, oh, you want me to fast from food for 3 days? Okay, I'll achieve it. But fasting from something that slows their brain down is a totally different ball game. And so that's why I say mindfulness and meditation and slowing the brain down enough to where they can be present and in the moment and not constantly 3 hours ahead, 3 days ahead, 3 months ahead in the future is so critical for threes to move into that healthy space. And fasting from social media might be, like you said, one of those things, because the fastest way to put a damper on what God has called you to do is compare it to something else that God has called someone else to do. And I learned this early on in my Enneagram journey of just understanding myself. We'll get to fours next week, but understanding myself is there is enough work. I felt so, I felt so empowered by the Holy Spirit in this one statement when I was going through my own journey with the Enneagram and understanding myself better, is that there is enough work to be done. There's enough work to be done for all of us to live out our passion, our purpose, and our calling. There's enough work to be done, right? Scripture says that the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And so what you're really saying there is that you get on this thing, you see social media, and let's just say you just started a project. You just started this new thing, and you see somebody else on social media posting about this same thing, but they've been doing it for 15 years, or they've got 15,000 followers or 15 million followers, and you started out with 100, and you're starting to compare yourself. Well, am I not any better than them? Or why are they so much better than me? And you go through this whole dialogue in your brain, when the reality is that you're comparing their middle of the film to your start. Right.
Yeah.
Like your story is just getting started. And while somebody else's has been playing out for years and years and years. And so, and I think that's true for anybody that's listening, whether you're a 3 or not a 3, we are constantly comparing ourselves to other people, to ourselves. We're criticizing, we take a selfie, we post it on there, and we have to show it to somebody, not only on social media, but on in real life. What do you think of this? What do you think of this? And it's like, man, like let's just calm down. Like, again, like, are we getting in front of God and saying, hey, what do you actually think about me? Because what everybody else thinks about me doesn't actually matter in the scheme of things.
Right.
Right now, what's happening is that we're so far more worried about what people are saying, what people are thinking, what their judgment is. And we're putting God on the back burner in so many things in our lives. And it's time to flip those two things and allow God to be the one thing that really truly drives you forward on a daily basis. And I think that's going to hit home with a lot of 3s specifically, because there is so much of that internal self-reflection, want to be seen as a certain type of person. Well, check yourself. Where are you looking to be seen? Are you looking to people, or are you allowing God to show you what he sees in you and what he's made you for?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, I think that was a good wrap up for a 3. What do you say?
I say yes. I say yes. I say run in your lane, stay in your lane, and don't slow down. Keep the focus on Christ, the author and finisher of your faith and the finisher of your achievements, because he is ultimately the one that's called you to it. So he will see you.
Awesome.
He will see you to the finish line.
Hey, so a couple things, a couple announcements. I think, and this I might actually make you do this, even if it's not correct. I did see on your social media on Chiro Coaching that you have 20% off of Enneagram coaching right now. Is that a true statement?
Sessions. Yep.
Okay, so if you let Angie know that you heard us on the Battle Ready podcast, she'll give you a little discount on sessions for coaching, for Enneagram coaching specifically. So her contact is going to be in the show notes and the details of this episode on Apple, on Spotify, iTunes, all the places that you're listening to this. For me, if you are ready to deep dive into what what's making you tick, what's going on, what's holding you back from becoming the person that God made you to be. I'm ready to help mentor you into the next level for your coaching, for your life. I've got Battle Ready mentoring happening right now. You can text the word battle to 33777, and that's going to get you a link to get you set up for a discovery call. It's a free 30-minute call. Me and you will get on the phone, and I will see if we'll both kind of see if each other is right, and if we want to make that partnership and start moving you towards your goals. Angie, I thank you for being on here for another week. I think week 3 or Enneagram 3 was going to be is awesome. Guys, keep a lookout on the Battle Ready Co. Instagram, because I'm posting some awesome stuff on there.
Yeah,
it's basically the same thing each week, each day of the week, just for each type it's changing. So keep a lookout, and send this out to your friends, teach them about Enneagram, and you guys will have a deeper and more profound relationship with each other. Love you guys. We'll talk to you soon. Make sure you go out and prepare your mind and get battle ready. Bye.